Welcome back to another episode of Focus on K-12, EdTech, and the Education Experience. I'm your host, Doug Konopelko, Education Strategist for CDWG. Today, I talk with Dr. Emily Bell, the Chief Information Officer of Fulton County Schools in Georgia. We talk about moving from bricks to clicks, keeping a focus on cybersecurity, and why it's important to keep data standards for our teachers and our students. Let's dive in.
My name is Dr. Emily Bell. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Fulton County Schools. Our district is right in the heart of Atlanta. We are 77 miles between the northernmost point and the southern point, and we are bisected right in the middle by Atlanta Public Schools. We serve about a little over 90,000 students, 95,000 students. We have over 100 schools. So we're definitely a metropolitan area with a lot of different socioeconomic diversity, many different languages and many challenges that come with that. I've been in this role now for just about a year. So I came into the role in the middle of the pandemic. So July of 2020. And still serving in this role. But I was with Fulton County Schools as the Executive Director of Accountability and District Applications for 2 years prior to that. But I've been in education, Doug, for 26 years now. 20 plus of those years have been in education technology leadership. So you can imagine, I've been in it from the ground floor up. I've been in it when we were only working off hard drives. We didn't have email. We didn't have internet in our classrooms, and I've stuck with it until today. I've served in a variety of different districts. So right now my experience is in this metro size, but I've also served in medium and small districts. And certainly the scale is different, but the challenges are very much the same throughout our state of Georgia and the country. I've been really fortunate to be able to collaborate with a number of my peers on the national level as well. And it's been a hard year for all of us. And I think that we have emerged successful. One of my favorite metrics that I always talk about is the fact that we were not in the news.
There you go. That's all it takes, right?
That's it.
Whenever you're talking about rolling something out, you think about like, how will this look as a headline with the goal of not making headlines? So you did it, you reached the goal of not making that headline.
Right. The headline being, we had some system failure. We were shut down, our network was shut down, or students weren't able to access their platforms for an extended period of time. We were very fortunate that we leaned into the platforms that we had. Our board and community supported when we wanted to expand our network bandwidth to make sure that we had capacity. They supported that, and they did it in a timely fashion so that we didn't suffer any kind of capacity issues. So we are very blessed in the district to have that wonderful support of our board and community. And I just have to also say that our teachers were the real champions. They were the real they stood out in this pandemic because they proved that they were resilient and that they could use these platforms in meaningful ways.
Absolutely. 100%. So you've been around ed tech for just a couple years or a couple decades. So what are one or two things that you think, we need to do better with, either in education as a whole or, within the ed tech realm in either Fulton County Schools or overall?
Yeah, I'm a certified teacher as well. So I come into this very technical role with the classroom experience, certified actually in every grade level. So that bigger question of what can we do better in education? Oh, Doug, we could talk for a long time. How about I just focus on maybe the ed tech part and
Sounds good.
how it applies to education as a whole. But what can we do better? I mean, really what we're doing right now is we're seeing a progression from bricks to clicks. So there was a lot of emphasis on learning and teaching in buildings and getting our students in buildings and our instructional staff in buildings and rallying there to get mastery for standards. But what we've learned is that we can also lean into platforms. We can click through, still engage in meaningful ways. So I would like for us we proved that we could do that. Now the challenge is going to be to draw upon those lessons that we've learned and, build on them. So not necessarily going right back to the bricks as we used to know it, but maybe just the joining of these two worlds, bricks and clicks together, so that mastery can help to happen anywhere, anytime. The other thing that I would say is that if we're talking about clicks, especially in the K-12 environment, Doug, we need to be really careful with our cybersecurity, with protecting our students' information. K-12 has been a target in that whole dark web world. They are after our information, and it's up to us as technology leaders to protect that. It's also up to the academic leaders to understand that they might have to sacrifice some convenience in order, or some speed in order for us to protect that environment effectively. For me, the security story is also very connected with having standards. So in the education world, standards are just commonplace, right? We have standards for learning. We need to have standards in our technology. We cannot just allow any kind of application to be used in the district anymore. We have to make sure that they're safe, supported, and secure. So again, that's why I think standards in technology is related to security.
Yeah, and security and standards, two pretty heavy topics. One thing I think that happens a lot is that security sort of gets swept under the rug unless there's a big crisis, right? Like right now, you mentioned there definitely is a crisis in surrounding educational data and student data, right, being targeted for attacks. So why do you think that security gets swept under the rug when there isn't a visible crisis like that?
Again, it's that convenience piece and the time. Our instructional time is so limited. And I, as a former classroom teacher, I completely understand wanting to guard the gate of every instructional minute. But even, when you get students into a classroom and think about the primary levels, especially primary, elementary, and we're asking students to authenticate to their device and to their files and what the teacher wants them to do, their platform. They need a username and they need a strong password. And so as an IT division, we're talking to staff about that authentication process. We're also trying to get that over the line with students. You're talking about a 9-year-old who's having to enter in capitals and special characters and a combination of letters. And, we've definitely played with a lot of different scenarios trying to make that be convenient, be easier, but it's got to be strong. And sometimes that takes time in the classroom to get that password put in right. And so you've got that piece. On the staff side, we're asking staff to, when they're not in our environment, to multi-factor authenticate. So, when we first started talking about multi-factor authentication, I mean, there was some pushback. Oh, that's just too much. That takes too much time. Yes, security measures are going to take time, but in the long run, they are going to protect the data, and that's becoming increasingly important.
Right. And it's not something that you see, right, when you're in the classroom. Right, to your point, if all of those things are working in concert and working well together, right, you don't notice that your student data is protected and secure. It just is, right?
Mhm.
So some of that also does stem then from that standardization, right? So when you're talking about standardization as it applies to the ed tech world, what type of standards or standardization are you focusing on?
I've got two areas that I'll talk about because you don't have time for all of them. But two things that I'll talk about. One is in the data standards themselves. Here at Fulton, we are members of IMS Global. This is an organization that is trying to create interoperability standards, like the one roster standards that vendors commit to, districts commit to, so that when we work together, that data can go back and forth very quickly, and those tools can be used in the classroom very quickly. Ed5 is another organization that we work with in terms of data standards. I just can't stress the importance of vendors, districts using and leaning into those standards enough. Um, Again, it's about efficiency of staff time and efficiency of getting that tool delivered to the classrooms so that those students can use it to master. The other thing I will talk about with standards is really the experience here in Fulton. So in March of 2020, everybody knows where they were in March of 2020. This is when everything started shutting down. In March of 2020, our schools, remember I said we have about 100 schools, they were all kind of using different kinds of software. They were using different kinds of platforms, like some were using G Suite, some were using Office 365, some were using Edmodo, some were using some traditional LMSs. And so when we switched into this remote learning, it really wasn't a new thing for Fulton County Schools because we had dipped our toe in the waters of digital learning days. Days when we really legitimately asked students to stay home and log into platforms to access their content and participate in this online exposure, which we knew was valuable, but they were all using different things. So we switched in March to remote. Again, they're all using different things, but now, parents and grandparents are at home. They're trying to facilitate multiple children, possibly in the household, multiple devices, and every child accessing a different platform, and maybe even a different platform for every teacher. So that choice that we allowed for our schools and we allowed for our teachers, as we went into May, when we did a survey, our parents indicated to us that that choice was killing them. They really wanted us to have more standardization of our applications. So there's not 20 places to go, there's one place to go. So
Right.
our superintendent had the foresight, the leadership to take that data from parents, that feedback from parents. And then as a district, we leaned into one platform. So we standardized on Microsoft Office, Microsoft Teams, and that became the standard place for all grade levels, all schools. And I'm so proud of, again, the resiliency of our schools, our teachers, to comply with that standard, because it was good for everybody. It was good for us in IT, because we have to support it. It's hard to support 20 things. You can really lean in when you have one thing that you're supporting. It's hard enough just to support that one thing. So it was good for us, it was good for parents, and it was good for students. So standards are important for that support piece. It's also important for security.
And where security needs to strike that balance with convenience, right? Standards and standardization need to strike that balance with choice, right? Which is what you were
Correct.
just talking about, because we know so many courses, just based on their course materials, will already have multiple platforms. So having one platform for all of the rest, right? The productivity and collaboration side at least helps eliminate some of that and control not just where people are going, but where all the data is going, right? So
That's right.
um,
And data, you mentioned data. I really can't leave the Fulton County Schools story without mentioning data. I think all of us were asked about engagement data. So our students are out there. How do we know what we're doing? So data became a very important ask in the district, and we began, again, leaning into our Microsoft license and Power BI. We stood up a number of dashboards to help our teachers and our administrators understand what our students were doing to the best of our ability. So dashboards became a very big part of our leadership role.
well, I want to thank you for spending some time with us, take us through some standards and some security, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Doug. Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us today on Focus on K-12 EdTech and the Education Experience. If you enjoyed today's show, please feel free to like, subscribe, and click the little bell so that you get notified whenever we post a new episode. Or reach out to me on Twitter @dconopelco. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time as we focus on K-12.